Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
However, I'll need a bit of time to do that since I researched on how to get rid of the weapon rather than make it so that you can interact with the soul fragments. Helion shrugged. If it's going to be too much trouble, then you can just go with the first option. I don't really mind since it would be good for me to get rid of this weapon. Shiro smiled. How about this? Give me around a week to work with these weapons. After a week, if I still haven't figured it out, we'll just get rid of Akram first. Helion suggested as Shiro nodded her head. Sure, I don't mind. However, you might want to be careful. When I was looking for your research notes, there was someone who was controlling the head of the faction as a puppet, and he seemed to know of me. We don't know his goal or reasons, so you want to be cautious. Shiro warned since it was an unfavorable position for them. The enemy knew of them, but they didn't know the enemy. All right, I think I might have to go back to New York for this, since it's probably safer over there. Helion nodded. Oh, before that though, I grabbed a few high-grade materials for you, so if you ever want to make some high-level weapons, these should suit your needs. Shiro smiled and pulled out metal after metal. Looking at the giant collection of materials used for blacksmithing being laid out on the table, Helion was quite overwhelmed by a few of them. Holy, that's all for me? He asked with disbelief as Shiro nodded her head with a smile. Yup. Anyways, it's pretty late into the night now, so you should get some rest. Me, Lil, Tion, and Ian will be leaving the city tomorrow since we got more artifact pieces to look for. Oh, you're leaving already? Yeah. You see, there's something coming up and we need to get stronger quickly. For Ian, she'll need to get pieces of this artifact in order to class up, so we're just doing that for her now. Shiro nodded her head. I see. All right. In that case, then I won't bother you any longer. Good night. Helion smiled and started to store things away in his inventory. Giving them a small wave, he left the room. Stretching lightly, Shiro was about to prepare to sleep when she realized that Tion was still in the room. You know, Lil Tion, I meant you too. Shiro chuckled. I know. I'm just searching for something in my inventory. Give me a second. Tion nodded. After a few moments, he brought out a small pill. Take this. It should help you with muscle fatigue. He smiled. You noticed? Shiro raised her eyebrow. Of course. Normally, you're quite expressive with your body language, but this time, it's rather reserved and hindered. I figured that you probably used something with a backlash against the enemy, so your body is recovering right now. Tion explained while giving her the pill. Backlash recovery pill. A pill to recover from the backlash received from any source. However, depending on the strength of the backlash, the effects of this pill may vary. Smiling softly, Shiro threw the pill into her mouth as a soothing energy could be felt spreading through her body, relieving her of some of the fatigue. Thank you. She smiled as Tion nodded his head. Watching him leave, Shiro sighed softly before changing into some pajamas. Since this room was a two-person room, Ian had the other bed. Go to sleep soon, okay, Ian? Amen. I'll go to sleep once I've finished watching this show. Ian replied. You know, I can hear what you're thinking, right? Nimue raised her eyebrows. Maybe it's okay to let him stay in the room. Shut it. Fine, Yutsundara. ####. Waking up in the morning, they had some food before making their way to the teleport shrine. Helion was with them since he also needed to use it. After all, he was making his way back to New York. So in 7 days' time, I'll give you a message about whether or not I've succeeded. If I haven't, we'll continue with getting rid of the sword. Helion smiled. Amen, good luck. Shiro waved her hand softly as Helion disappeared from his spot. Now then, I believe it's our turn now. We managed to collect 4 pieces of the artifact so far, and there are 3 more left on the map that Lucius gave us. We can probably do it in a day or so if we're fast. She muttered. That gives us around 4 days to do anything we want. Tion chuckled. Amen, perhaps we should meet up with the main party in these 4 days. I'm still trying to find clues on the Ice Queen, but there haven't been any leads. If there were, I would have wanted to go look for her instead. Shiro sighed. There hasn't been any news from the sect members either. Except for Theria, none of the other queens have revealed themselves so easily. At most, there were only abnormal increases of mana near a few cities that would disappear after a while. Tion shook his head. Well, we do know how important the initial setup is for the new age. Unless they're prepared like Theria, I doubt we'll see too many queens doing the same thing. I suppose we can spend the 4 days we have spare to scout out the places with sudden spikes of mana. Though, thinking of this, the Ice Queen did leave after her anchor was stabilized. Do you think it might be hard, if not impossible, to destroy an anchor once it's stabilized? After all, we did catch the Fire Queen off guard before her anchor could stabilize. Shiro asked curiously. Perhaps. We'll probably figure it out once we visit a few of the spots. Nantion nodded. Agreeing with him, the three of them entered the teleport shrine. For the next few days, Shiro had both Nantion and Ine go to each of the artifact locations while she would spend some time with Addie and do some research on the side. After all, she needed to look for the Ice Queen's location. During this, Lucius had managed to uncover where the 8th artifact piece was, meaning that there were only 2 more to go. On the 4th day, they managed to collect all of the artifact pieces they could. With the artifact collection partially complete, they started to make their way to the places where there had been large spikes of mana. Similar to the frozen city that Shiro had discovered on Mount Fuji after the Ice Queen stabilized her anchor, there were small signs leading to the potential presence of different queens at each of the sites. Most of the signs led to different types of queens, but there were a few that were almost identical, meaning several anchors from the same queen. However, despite all the anchors being set down by the queens, she hadn't found any that had set up a domain like Theria had. They continued to keep their presence a mystery, while the Queen of the Beast already had a head start. Naturally, this head start wasn't the best choice since all attention was on her, but the government didn't want to go on an all-out war with her. They wanted to study the concept of queens first before making a move. After all, they still had the demons to worry about. While on the topic of demons, Shiro did message Keiko and Kiyomi about how they were doing. However, their response was rather concerning since the demons were being strangely passive. Even when they stopped expanding the human army into the demon territory, the demons continued their retreat, leaving hundreds of unoccupied lands. With most of the current world unknown to the human race, the frontliners didn't want to venture too deep into unknown territory. Instead, they formed small scout teams to keep a tab on what the demons are doing, but so far, nothing's changed, and they continued to retreat deeper into the demon territory. Sigh. The world is changing quite quickly, huh? Signs of the new age coming, I suppose. Do you think the demons have a better idea on what's happening? Shiro asked as she turned to Nantion. Maybe. There was some connection between Black Monarchy and the demons from what I know, but it was never too deep. Now that we know Black Monarchy is also associated with Theria, there's probably a chance that they used the information to finalize a few trades. Nantion shrugged. True. Regardless, let's continue with the task at hand. Shiro smiled and glanced towards the ruin that was in front of them. From their previous investigation, it was said that there had been multiple spikes of mana within this singular ruin. Whether or not that meant different queens were fighting over this spot or not, she'll know once she explores this place. Right now, they were part of a temporary expedition force that was formed in order to investigate these ruins. Can I have your attention, please? A man shouted out as everyone's eyes turned towards him. My name is Yorm, and as you can see, I'm not exactly human. There are a few of you who might be unsettled by our presence, but just know that we have a common goal of figuring out what's happening in this ruin. The government has already promised rewards that are equal to our participation, but that is no excuse for any of us to turn against one another. I do hope that there will be no glory stealing, and we behave like civilized people. Yorm said with a smile. He was a relatively muscular man with fox-like ears protruding from the top of his head. His eyes were split in the center rather than the rounded pupils that are seen in humans. Behind him was a singular red foxtail that would sway ever so slightly. Now, I've been assigned as the leader of the expedition force, but just to make sure, is there anyone who is against this? We might as well sort our differences out here rather than in there where danger lurks around every corner. He called out as the members of the force shook their heads. Good. Now I'm going to give you one more briefing about the current situation for those that are still a little confused. 5 days ago, there were reports of a large amount of mana being emitted from this ruin, which promptly disappeared in 5 hours. However, the next day, the same thing happened. This repeated every day, and each time it happened, it seems to be a different frequency, so we're here to investigate the cause. Whether it be just a few people fighting each other or a mysterious phenomenon, We're here to find out the cause and report back. Unless there is a fork in the path, we'll mostly stick as a group. Naturally, we'll have scout-based classes at the front, tank/fighters in the mid with healers and mages at the back. Yurm instructed as people nodded their heads. If they did things this way, their participation/contribution would be the same, so the reward for everyone would be equal. That way, people wouldn't be fighting each other for glory, hindering their expedition. Since Shiro was basically an all-rounder, she decided to go as the healer. While her title may not activate since there were only 25 people in the current expedition force, making her gray skill target only one person rather than everyone, she could still use her fire of life. Plus, she also had a myriad of support buffs that she could give to everyone. Nan Tian decided to go fighter to protect Shiro. Not that she needed it, of course, but he didn't want to take any chances. As for Ian, she was in the backlands with Shiro as a mage. Overall, there were 5 scouts, 12 fighters/tanks, 3 mages, and 2 healers not including Shiro, Ian, and Nan Tian. With the roles assigned to everyone, they started to make their way inside the ruin. Looking around, Shiro looked for any clues that may give her a hint, such as any carvings or writings that may give her a hint. While there wasn't any writing on the walls, there were a few carvings and images depicting battles much like the ones that she saw in her grave, where she recovered the first piece of Yin's artifact. However, the carvings did little to inform her of anything since they just looked like humans fighting against humans. As for the architecture of this place, it reminded Shiro of Mayan architecture that featured geometric patterns and carvings that looked like faces from afar. Progressing deeper into the ruin, Shiro had sent out a few of her drones to scout out the place without anyone knowing. In addition to this, every step she took, she would send out a pulse of mana so that she could mentally map out the ruins. So far, she discovered that there were quite a few rooms within the ruin. Some were more pleasant than others, while a few housed torture devices, which was quite strange to Shiro. However, since she didn't know the origin of the ruin, there was a possibility that having torture rooms in these ruins were normal. After walking for a while, they discovered a cross-shaped path with 3 other doorways. Thanks to her drones, she knew that all 3 doorways led to a different part of the ruin. The first doorway, the one to the left, brought them to what seemed to be an underground praying hall of sorts. There was a large open area with a giant statue in the center and several pillars supporting the ceiling of this room. In the second doorway, the one directly in front of them, it led to the torture rooms along with a corridor that led deep underground. Despite sending a few drones down there, they haven't reached the bottom yet, which caused warning bells to ring in her mind. Finally, the last doorway was one that led them to the resting chambers that were filled with what seemed to be small personal rooms. There are 3 paths, so we'll send the scouts to each path. Don't go too far since we don't know what's at the end. Just get a rough idea before coming back. We'll act depending on what the scouts find. Yurm called out as no one had any objections. While the scouts traveled through each of the paths, the main group sat down and rested for now. There were a few people who decided to backtrack a little to investigate the wall carving a little more, and Yurm only warned them not to go too far. As for Shiro, she scouted further into each of the pathways with her scouts. She discovered that the first room housed a few secret areas that were too small to be classified as rooms, while also too big to be called compartments. Within these areas, she could see faint signs of magic, but it was hidden rather well. There seems to be signs showing that it's been recently tampered with, so we'll probably find quite a few clues in the prayer room. She thought to herself. Of course, she didn't forget to search further in the other rooms. For her, the torture room looked pretty ordinary, as whoever tampered with the prayer room must have just ignored the torture room, as there were no signs of recent use. However, when she sent her drones to scout in the third room, they were taken out before she could even get a glimpse of what was in there. Narrowing her eyes with a frown, she gently pressed her fingers against the walls and tried to map out that specific area with her mana. However, before it could reach that room, it was blocked by a barrier of sorts. "What's wrong?" Nan Tian asked as he could see her serious face. Gesturing to her phone, she sent him a message since she didn't want other people to hear her. "Shiro, I found something rather interesting. My drones were destroyed before I could get a proper look into the third pathway, the one on the right. It seems like something or someone is hiding in there. I also tried to use my mana to map out the area, but a barrier blocked it." Reading the message, Nantion furrowed his eyebrows behind his mask. Nantion, that is rather concerning. If Yorm decides to split the group up for each path, do you want to go to the third path and deal with this threat? Shiro, sure. Waiting for a few moments, the scouts started to return and reported their findings. Thankfully, it seemed like none of them had suffered from any injuries, meaning each path was safe to some degree. Listening to their reports, Yorm thought to himself for a brief moment before turning towards the rest of the party. I propose that we should continue to stay as a group. We'll use up more time, but we'll be able to guarantee safety, Yorm said with a smile. Once again, there were no objections, and the group started to make their way to the first room. #####. Meanwhile, a pair of eyes looked up towards the walls. If there was nothing in the way, people would realize that it was directly looking towards them. Cracking its neck, it licked its lips in eagerness before fading into the shadows. Arriving in the prayer room, the group immediately started to search around for any clues. While this was happening, Shiro just so happened to have come across the compartments that had been tampered with. Looking at the points that were emitting a small wave of mana, Shiro pressed her palms against the floor and tried to get a better view of this formation. However, while she could see parts of it, the important aspects were hidden properly, and not even Shiro could see them unless she was to completely obliterate this place. Whoever did this is experienced, she thought with a frown. Well, they did manage to get rid of your vision in the third room. They're quite cautious. Nimue nodded. Amen. Regardless, I think I might be able to edit this magic circle a little. Add a little program to potentially help me. Shiro smiled and started to tamper with the magic circle. While this was happening, Nantion would cover her so that none of the other members of the party would notice. After a while, they started to share their investigation. However, it was also during this that they started to notice that quite a few of them have disappeared. Even Shiro was surprised since she didn't sense anything. Did you notice anything? She glanced towards Nantion. No. Seems like the enemy is a pretty good assassin, Nantion replied while glancing around the room to see if he could pick anything out. Holding her chin, Shiro thought to herself for a moment before flexing her finger. Thin strands of nanotech wire started to thread itself through the room as she created a spider web of sorts. Whenever something or someone touches the wire, she'll be notified. There seems to be something lurking in this ruin. Do we have anyone that is adept with tracking type spells? Yorm called out with a frown. I do, but I'll need a piece of the thing we're looking for. There's not even a speck of blood or torn fabric, so I don't think I can find them. One of the mages shook their head as Yorm furrowed his brows. That makes things difficult, he muttered. Sighing softly, he shook his head and looked back at the group. I'd say we should end the investigation now. We're currently lacking in the correct personnel to deal with this threat. Despite our levels being 200 or above, the enemy was still able to take out a few of us without anyone noticing. The dangers aren't worth it, Yorm suggested. Just as he said this, a faint shadow wrapped around his head. Crack. In a single moment, his head was torn off his body. Widening her eyes, Shiro summoned Athra, while Nantion activated a Tier 5 magic circle. As for Ian, she flicked her wrist and purple flames erupted out from every corner of the room, exposing the shadowed figure. Hanging from the roof, a monstrosity could be seen with thin, elongated limbs that looked as though it could be snapped with a single breeze. The rib cage protruded out of its body while its spine twitched from the sudden exposure of light. It had long black hair that seemed to cover most of his face, but Shiro could faintly make out a pair of glowing red eyes, exposed bones, and sharpened teeth. Its jaw was a mangled mess of flesh that was fused together haphazardly. Within his exposed ribcage, they could see corpses slowly being drained and turned to ash. Before the monster could pull Yorm into his ribcage, his body suddenly disassembled into petals and reassembled a few meters away with blood dripping from the corner of his lips. Instead of his singular tail that they were used to seeing, it had now split into 7 parts. TCH, rude fellow. I thought I felt like my life was in danger. He narrowed his eyes as mana erupted out of him. Flickering in front of the monster, Shiro twisted her body and activated Athra's first ability. With a tether linking the two of them together, strength surged through her body. Clank. Striking against his thin arms, Shiro's sword was stopped completely, much to her surprise. Feeling danger overwhelm her senses, she activated her grace skill without hesitation. Asterisk bang. Crashing to the other side of the room, Shiro could feel her entire body shattering from that single hit. Despite activating the skill before she took any damage, the force of the attack still brought her HP down to a dangerous level. Quickly activating rejuvenation to stop herself from being killed in one hit, Shiro tried to stand back on her feet only to stumble slightly. Kueh. Feeling a few broken ribs punctured her lungs, Shiro threw up a mouthful of blood as she could see her HP decrease continuously even though she used rejuvenation. Shiro, Nan Tian called out in surprise as he sent his magic towards the monster. Before the stakes of light could even touch the monster, shadow erupted out from the tiles beneath them and blocked the attack. Primary Anchor Guardian has been summoned. Demon God Veron has taken notice of the attack. *T. This is the primary anchor point of a demon god. Shiro widened her eyes in shock and looked towards the Guardian once more. Primary Anchor Guardian LVL? HP? MP? Lil Tian, can you see what level he is? Shiro shouted out as her HP finally stabilized. Yes, Nan Tian said as Shiro could sense a bit of unease in his voice. Level 510. Shock filled Shiro's eyes since she didn't expect to run into a Tier 6 being this soon. Without hesitation, she activated her celestial raiment and chose Astral Rift as the base element. Creating 2 portal orbs beneath Een and Nan Tian, she immediately brought them into her realm and dashed away while dragging them with her. We can't fight this. As a person who has reached Tier 6 before, I can tell you that he's just playing around for now. That hit he did to me was akin to me batting a fly away, and it still forced me to use several life-saving skills. Shiro shouted out as the 3 of them dashed through the realm without looking back. Despite there only being a level difference of 10 from the peak of Tier 5, this 10 levels was like a giant, uncrossable chasm. Even Nan Tian in his prime would probably be killed by this monster. If anything, she was thankful that she wasn't killed in one shot. Jumping out of the rift, she glanced back at the ruins and made a mental note on their current location. Seems like I won't be looking for anchors anytime soon, especially if there's a chance that we might run into a god-grade anchor like this one. Shiro frowned. God-grade. Nan Tian raised his eyebrow. Just something I thought of now. Despite there being an unkillable assassin in that ruin, we did manage to find out something rather interesting. The fact that A, anchors can have guardians and B, gods can place down anchors too. So for queens, their anchors will be queen grade while gods have god grade anchors. Sounds simple. Shiro smiled while they continued to run. After all, if a Tier 6 really wanted to kill you, you won't be able to survive. So far, the monster hadn't tried to chase them down, but Shiro didn't want to take any chances. Since anchors are a no-go right now, due to the danger they hold, I think we'll have to prioritize something else until you get your class up. Nan Tian nodded. Indeed. We have a few days to burn, so I think I'm going to do some research about class ups so that I can get into Tier 5 quickly. I can probably extend my deadline with Helion since we're not in too much of a rush. Shiro smiled. Suddenly, a decapitated head flew past the 3 of them as their breaths halted for a moment. Turning around slowly, they could see the Guardian smiling at them with its twisted maw. Compared to before, his body seemed much healthier as his arms were more fleshed out. Once again, his ribcage received a few new tenants. Where are you going? His broken voice crackled with sadistic ecstasy. Shiro, Nan Tian called out as he pulled his mask off. Yeah. I don't think we can run away from this. I know. Do you have a charge of your extraction ready? No. Why do you think I told Helion that I can be ready in a week? Shiro sighed. I see. In that case, then I want you to run as fast as you can. Nan Tian smiled before a golden radiance erupted from his body. Creating several light orbs around him, he charged towards the monster. *T. Estrella. Shiro shouted out as she knew running was not an option. Rather than letting Nan Tian face this thing off on his own while she ran away, she'd rather fight with him side by side. If they die, then that's just fate. With her shout, a portal opened up beside her as Estrella dashed out with a serious expression. Looking at Shiro, Nan Tian, Estrella, and Een who were charging towards him fearlessly, the Guardian's initial ecstasy faded since he wanted to see fear in their eyes. Cracking his body, he charged towards them. Before the four could even attack, the Guardian's ribcage extended out and pieced towards them. Since she knew that she could not block the attack at all, or else she'd take critical damage, Shiro twisted her body and barely dodged the spike by the skin of her teeth. As for Een, she dived into her shadow in order to dodge the ribcage. Appearing behind the Guardian's shadow, she slammed her hands into his back. Asterisk, boom. Releasing a torrent of phoenix fire, a pillar of flames enveloped the Guardian's body. Weak flames. The Guardian scoffed as his spine stabbed towards Een. Seeing this, Estrella flicked her arm, forcefully bringing Een into her realm and stopped the spine from damaging her. Just as this happened, Nantian arrived in front of the Guardian. Swiping his hand, the orbs that floated around him shifted into spikes that pierced into his body and attempted to stab him into the group only for it to shatter upon impact. TCH, so this is the difference between Tier 5 and Tier 6, huh? No wonder Shiro said that we had no chance. Nantian thought with a frown. Twisting his body, he activated a few of his berserk skills so that his stats could experience a huge boost. Stomping down, a Tier 5 magic circle expanded beneath the Guardian as a light cage started to wrap around the Guardian. With his movements slightly hindered, Shiro appeared above the Guardian with her sword drawn. Right now, she had her berserk skills activated. Her soul sword was in her left hand while Athra was in her right. Twisting her body, she slashed towards his head with the soul sword. As long as it hits, she can start to apply the first effect of her soul sword. One slice against the skin will inject a lethal poison into their system while their soul is slowly corrupted. While she didn't know how high his poison resistance was, the additional effect of corrupting his soul should hinder his movements. As for the second effect, she doubted that it would work. After all, as long as she stabbed him in the heart, she could seal away his soul into her sword so that her next attack was empowered. Asterisk clang. Once again, her sword bounced off the body of the Guardian as it didn't even leave a single scratch. Damn, even with my berserk skills activated, it doesn't work, Shiro thought with a frown. Activating her Celestial Empress's domain, she received a boost of 30% to her INT, AGI, and DX, while her elemental damage was increased by 200%. Enhancing Athra with Cosmic Ice, she swung at him once more, but this time with the goal of freezing him in place. Asterisk ping. Unfortunately, the thin layer of ice that slowly formed on his body was shrugged off without any problems. This is boring. You can just die if you're not going to show me fear. The Guardian narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, a giant Tier 6 magic circle erupted out from beneath him as Shiro felt the danger of death, inching closer to her. Without her command, Estrella was about to summon more portals when a sharpened bone shot out of the ground and pierced a hole in her stomach. Arg! Crying out in pain, Estrella's spell was cancelled out as blood poured out of her abdomen. Quickly activating Grace and Life Fire on Estrella, Shiro thought about what she could do to harm the Guardian since none of her attacks were working. Glancing towards Nantian, she bit the bottom of her lip before opening her mouth. Lil Tian, do you trust me? She asked with a soft smile. Of course. Nantian nodded while trying to avoid the bone spikes that are trying to pierce him as well. Then study this properly while I buy some time, Shiro said as she threw over a tablet of sorts before activating all of her berserk skills. Forcing Azul and Adi out of her mana realm, she grabbed the Guardian's head while ignoring all of his attacks and dragged him into the Celestial Gardens. You're coming with me, she shouted out with anger. His spine had already pierced parts of her body, and one nearly hit her head, but she was casting all of her healing spells just to stay alive. Shiro, Nantian shouted out in shock since Shiro was now alone with the Guardian in her throne world. Gritting his teeth, he quickly grabbed the tablet since there must have been a reason for Shiro to do this. After all, she did ask him if he trusted her. Opening the tablet, hundreds of records filled the screen as study after study of information piled up in front of him. Her experiences that led up to become a Tier 6 legend, what she did while she was a Tier 6 legend along with the record of her fights. Everything she knew was inserted into the tablet. Realizing it to be information about the next tier of magic and the concepts behind being a Tier 6 legend, Nantian understood that Shiro wanted him to achieve the feat of crafting a powerful spell so that they could potentially kill the Guardian. However, with this much information presented in front of him, it was a gamble on whether or not he could actually learn it all and do something with this information. Damn, Izul, Estrella, Een, help me write down this information on the ground. We need to work quick since Shiro's in danger. Nantion shouted out as his mind was filled with panic right now. If he didn't succeed in achieving a Tier 6 magic circle, Shiro's efforts would be wasted. ####. Standing in the celestial gardens with blood pouring out of her body, Shiro had a soft smile on her face. Are you suicidal? The Guardian narrowed his eyes. Perhaps, but I know I can't deal the final blow to you, so I'm trusting it to Lil Tian. Shiro chuckled. It would go to waste if I kill you now. Depends. I'm quite tenacious if I have to say so myself. Shiro chuckled. Overconfident. I don't think you quite understand the difference between you and me. Tier 6 is a new realm altogether, the Guardian said while glancing around this strange world. The large statues seemed to be there for decoration, but he couldn't help but feel as though there was something more to this. Oh, don't worry, I know fully well what a Tier 6 legend can achieve. However, all my enemies know that I'm quite unkillable with how many healing spells I have. Shiro smiled. However, it was a bluff. She had already used her rejuvenation, so that was out of the picture. Her gray skill had 8 charges left, and she was still able to use her Lyre plus rune, which is equal to a charge of grace. In addition to this, she still had the miracle skill which she extracted from Ikari. Unfortunately, despite all of this, the Guardian would only need 10 or so attacks to kill her for good. Cracking his head, the Guardian looked at her with disinterest before swiping his hand. Poochie. Suddenly, claw marks appeared on her torso as her body was cleaved in half. Coughing up blood, she quickly activated her grace skill and her body started to mend itself back together. Your trick is quite interesting. The Guardian smiled as he could finally see some semblance of fear in Shiro's eyes. Taking a deep breath, Shiro braced herself for the beatdown of her life. Yura, readying her swords, she started to stack more berserk skills onto her body as she could feel her bones cracking once more. However, with her healing skills supporting her life right now, she could hopefully give the Guardian a run for his money, which was unlikely, but there was nothing else Shiro could do at this point. Activating Hollow Deceit, her clone started to charge towards the Guardian as she did the same to camouflage her location. However, the Guardian only snickered and allowed all of the clones to strike at him. Since they weren't doppelgangers with their own combat potential, their attacks phased through his body while Shiro's sword barely managed to make a small chip on his sin despite all her buffs. Creating a portal under her, she quickly jumped in before reappearing in the air. Pushing her hands out, hundreds of cannons were created within her celestial gardens as she aimed it at the Guardian. Boom. Firing all of the cannons, Shiro took this chance to grab her soul sword and cut her palm in order to activate the second effect. Slice it on yourself, and all of your positive emotions will be locked away, leaving the perfect killing machine behind for a short while in order to eradicate your enemies. Slowly, a black mark materialized on Shiro's arm as her eyes became cold. Right now, she needed maximum efficiency in order to buy as much time as she could. Come on. Nantion gritted his teeth in desperation as he tried his best to comprehend the Tier 6 magic circles. Reading through Shiro's notes, he started to understand the core concepts of being a Tier 6 legend, but knowing and doing were two separate things. To make matters worse, his mind was constantly distracted when he could see Een becoming pale as time went on. Understanding that Shiro's life was tied with Yin's, the more injured Een became, the closer Shiro was to death. Biting his lips, he read through the notes and wondered what he was missing. He was constructing his magic circles and was even trying to upgrade his element, but there was still a missing piece that was preventing him from finalizing a Tier 6 magic circle. What am I missing? He wondered to himself. Watching Yin's face become paler, his worries grew as time was running out. Pulling at his hair, panic started to fill his mind as Shiro had basically entrusted him with her life. Seeing this, Izul also grew nervous but didn't want to say anything since Nantion couldn't afford to be distracted right now. Suddenly, she could feel Addie trying to get out of her grasp. Addie, please behave, okay? Izul tried to pacify Addie, but it didn't work. Furrowing his brows in annoyance, Addy released an aura of fire which forced Azul to let go of him. Stumbling over to Nantian, Addy also looked at the tablet with a worried face. You also want to help your mother, huh? Nantian smiled softly as Addy nodded his head. Reading through the text, he tried to point out anything that might seem like it could work, but it was fruitless. However, as he continued to point at random sentences, Nantian noticed that a few of the sentences had a common theme between them. Naturally, not all of the sentences had this, but for the ones that did, he felt like he was stepping closer to the truth. When Shiro became a Tier 6 legend, her control over her element extended to the point where she could make a flying fortress the size of a city with ease. While one can achieve something of similar quality and size as a Tier 5, the detail of construction varied greatly. Instead of having her magic destroy the city, she had to think about how it would work in balance, or else the entire construction of the fortress would crumble. The level of control and understanding of her element was on a much deeper level, one that surpassed the system since it was a man-made element, meaning she understood the origin. Nantian thought to himself as the words seemed to link themselves together, forming a key to a library of ideas that he had never considered before. His main element was light, but his understanding of the origin was rudimentary compared to what Shiro understood about the origin of nanobots and how they worked. Closing his eyes, he searched into his own mana realm and looked towards the light island. Walking to the center, he sat down and started to comprehend the origin of light. ####. She didn't know how long had passed, but Shiro didn't care. At this point, she needed to delay the Guardian as much as she could. Unfortunately for her, she was all out of options as her body crashed against the pillar inside her celestial gardens. Most of the architecture in this place had been destroyed in the battle, as all that remained was broken ruins. I'll be honest, you're the most tenacious meal I've seen in a long time. You've put up quite a fight. The Guardian sneered as he looked at the wounded Shiro who was laying in a puddle of her own blood. If you don't cook a meal properly, you will get diarrhea. All you can do is blame yourself for your food fighting back. Shiro laughed as she tried to wipe the blood from her eyes. However, her body was weak to the point where she couldn't even move a single muscle anymore. She had already expended every single use of her healing skills as the broken pieces of Athra laid next to her. Indeed. How about I properly finish the meal then? The Guardian smiled and swung his arm towards her. Time seemed to slow down as her thoughts accelerated. Despite trying her best, it seemed like the Grim Reaper's cold, fleshless hands had a proper grasp on her neck this time. Is this really how I will die? Unable to even land a single hit? Is this really the end of my story? She wondered to herself. She had too many responsibilities and people that are counting on her, so she couldn't leave things like this. Not like this. I can't die like this. I haven't told Lyrica about my life with her mother. I haven't met my parents. I haven't watched Ian, Lisa and Addie grow up into proper adults. I haven't saved the spirit race. I haven't guaranteed the safety of my loved ones. I haven't kept my promises that I had made. I haven't lived a full life yet. I don't want to die just yet. Gritting her teeth, nanobots started to surge around her as her garden started to shift. The broken pieces of architecture that the Guardian had destroyed started to break down into nanobots, while the giant statues surrounding the place started to move. Asterisk clang. Crashing his claw against the metallic defenses that appeared around Shiro, the Guardian was rather surprised that his attack was blocked. The floor had sunk down to create a bunker around Shiro's body, while the shield above her continuously regenerated in order to dispel the force of the attack. A final push before death. The Guardian narrowed his eyes before smiling. Useless. Raising his arm, Tier 6 magic circles appeared around him as they aimed towards Shiro. Asterisk rumble. Before they could fire, the garden started to tremble as the walls of this world collapsed. Bringing them back to reality, the Celestial Gardens was forcefully cancelled, but the nanobots remained with Shiro. Glaring at the Guardian, Shiro grinned with bloodshot eyes. Enjoy your new prison, though I doubt it'll last. Wrapping around the Guardian, a tower of nanobots started to construct itself in front of her as his body was sent high into the sky. Pain filled her mind as blood started to pour from her nose. She couldn't handle the stress this put on her body, especially in her current condition. However, this was something she had to do. Pressing her hand against the ground, She started to deprave the very earth of its mana as she needed it to construct a prison that could hold back the guardian, one that could buy them enough time. Even if her body was reduced to ash, she had to succeed with this task. Yura, shouting out in anger, the guardian started to attack his surroundings with madness, but the walls continued to regenerate. Even when he ripped out a large chunk of metal and reduced it to dust, new pieces would emerge and replace the damaged parts. Glaring at Shiro with hatred, the feeling of being deprived of a kill drove the guardian to madness. However, no matter how powerful his attacks were, the prison continuously fixed itself and slowly grew in size. Despite knowing that this was a temporary fix for Shiro, the guardian was still angered by her actions. Asterisk, bang 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 bang. Hundreds of explosions could be heard as the guardian started to destroy the prison with large-scale attacks. As the creator of this constantly expanding prison, Shiro could see how much damage he caused with a single hit, but she didn't care right now. The only thought that ran through her mind was that she needed to buy extra time. Just a single second was enough. If she could delay it by a second, she could delay it by another. Just one more. Just one more. The same thought repeated in her mind, but it was effective. As she was borrowing the mana from the nature around them, the trees started to wither away while the grass was turned to ash. Due to the fact that her mind was solely dedicated to getting that extra second, Shiro did not notice Estrella, Izul, or Addie watching her in shock as the size of the prison had grown to a ridiculous state. Despite her large mana reserve, this was something outside of her capabilities should she not be extracting mana from the earth itself with the help of her nanobots. Suddenly, a pair of hands gently wrapped around her as Shiro could see Nantion's face that was filled with worry. Sorry I took so long. He apologized while holding Shiro's broken body. Just the sight of her current state made him feel as though a knife was plunged into his heart, but this was not the time to wallow in sadness. Carrying Shiro's body, he stood up and looked towards the prison. Mana surged around him as a giant Tier 6 magic circle appeared above the prison. Incinerate, he said coldly as a pillar of radiance descended from the very sun itself. Light seemed to fade from their surroundings as the only visible source of light was now the pillar. Without even looking at the effects, Nantion turned to Estrella. Transport everyone as far as you can from this place. With my current mana, I can only funnel this spell for another 5 seconds or so. Nantion said with a frown. Nodding her head, Estrella waved her hand as a portal opened up in front of them. Jumping in, the party quickly left before the Guardian could chase them. After all, despite having achieved the feat of using Tier 6 magic, he was still only a level 450 plus, so killing the Guardian was just a pipe dream. It was a miracle that they could even leave with their lives intact. As the party left the area, the Guardian crawled out of the melted prison with charred skin. Glaring at their previous location with anger, he wanted to chase, but knew that he had to protect the anchor point. Now that he had experienced the feeling of a kill slipping out of his hands at the last moment, he was going to kill everything with his full power. There will be no more playing around. However, before he returned to the anchor point, he looked at the prison pieces and narrowed his eyes. From what he had seen, this was something outside of Shiro's capabilities. The sheer size and regenerative power of this prison was actually able to restrain him for 30 seconds. The feat astounded him since the girl was just level 200. However, he knew that this was only achievable due to the fact that she had consumed the mana from the surroundings. After all, the lush forest was partially turned to a desert as the rich mana was deprived from this place to form his prison. A part of his power was to assimilate parts of things that he consumes. With the nanobots still wiggling around despite their owner leaving, it gave the Guardian an idea. If he consumes the nanobots and assimilated it into his own body, could he deprave the surroundings of mana like what she did? If he could he then convert his body to nanobots so that it would constantly regenerate as long as he could supply it with mana? Grabbing a piece of the nanobots, he shoved it into his ribcage and the nanobots started to fuse with his body. With a crooked grin, he continued to feed himself with the prison that Shiro had constructed. Little did he know, the consequences of placing nanobots into your body without the proper preparation could result in something much worse. But in his search for more power, such thoughts were thrown aside. #####. Exiting the portal and entering the nearby city, Nantian quickly ran to the teleport shrine so that he could get Shiro some medical help from the sect. He didn't even need to scan her body to see her condition, as she was reduced to a state where she kept muttering, "Just one more second." Izul was currently carrying the unconscious Een on her back, while Estrella held Addie. As the four of them approached the teleport shrine, Nantian could see a few government officials arriving in the city with serious faces. "Is this the closest city?" one of the agents asked with a frown. Yes. The source of the mana spike was deep into the forest where the ruins are. There were 2 spikes of mana in the last few moments that exceed even the highest mana spikes that were recorded by the government. They presume that it is something either in the late stages of Tier 5 or a new tier that hasn't been confirmed yet. Another replied. Hearing this, Nantian knew that they wanted to search for the Guardian, but that was a bad move. Right now, there was no one in this world that can take down that being. Even if he was level 500 right now, he would struggle, as just having Tier 6 magic wasn't enough. Gritting his teeth, he wondered if he should warn them or not, since the best choice they can make is to call for an evacuation. Until a Tier 6 being appeared on their side, no one would be able to deal with that Guardian. What would Shiro want to do? He wondered to himself. From his understanding of her, she would just ignore these people, but with the new age coming soon, they needed all the manpower they could get. She would give them a warning, and if they didn't heed it, she would leave them be. Looking down at Shiro's face, he smiled softly before looking towards the government officials. "You don't want to do that," he said as they turned towards him. "Why not?" One of them furrowed his brows. "The thing in the forest is not something we can deal with right now. It's a Tier 6 being. Unless we surpass the boundaries of Tier 5 and enter Tier 6, no one can kill that thing," Nantian warned. "How would you know?" "That's for you to find out, as I have more important matters. Just know that you should work on evacuating everything around here so that there aren't any more unnecessary casualties," he replied with a shake of his head. Just as he was about to turn and leave, one of the agents stood in front of him and blocked his path. "Sorry, I'll need to borrow more of your time for you to provide us with more information," the agent said while presenting his government ID. "Well, that's too bad, huh? I've already given you my warning, so leave me be." Nantian narrowed his eyes. Feeling a shiver down his spine, the agent froze up in fear. Despite being a Tier 5 adventurer that was higher than level 400, he felt like the man in front of him could erase him with a single thought. He was correct. With Nantian being able to now cast Tier 6 magic, albeit a little troublesome due to the stress it placed on him, his mastery over light was now on a whole new level. Even if he was to cast a Tier 4 light magic, it would be comparable to a Tier 5, making him stand above his peers with ease. "I'm sorry for being rude. I can see that you are carrying an injured person right now, so I won't be bothering you anymore." The agent bowed while sweat dripped off his face. The other agents were confused but decided to step back for now. "Thank you." Nantian nodded before entering the teleport shrine with the rest of the party. ####. You're back already. Why is it that your life is at risk around every corner? A voice rang out as Shiro floated in the voice. Hearing the voice, Shiro's heart sank to her stomach as she recognized it. "Big sis," she called out hesitantly as Kuromi's figure could be seen materializing next to her. "Not quite." Kuromi smiled apologetically. "What do you mean by not quite?" Shiro furrowed her brows in confusion. "I'm using the memory of Kuromi that you keep deep in your own soul so that I can talk to you. You can't fully accept that you're the same people since you crave a familial figure like Kuromi, one that understood you on a deeper level. If you accepted that Kuromi and you were 2 identical people, it means you accept the fact that there was never a big sis to begin it, and it was just you talking to yourself all this time." Kuromi smiled sadly while cupping Shiro's cheeks. "You're lonely, aren't you?" she asked as Shiro paused. "You lose family and friends with every step you take on the long staircase known as life. The higher you walk, the more you lose. The danger of hurting yourself increases as you go higher and higher. So many times have I seen you stumble over the edge of life, only to grab on with undying will and drag yourself out. So many times have I seen you return to the void where your soul should pass on, only for you to escape and continue living. Despite understanding that the higher you go, the more you'll lose, you continue to walk the staircase without any fear. Why do you continue like this? What are you working towards? What makes you defy death over and over again? Staying silent, Shiro looked at the figure of Kuromi and smiled. Because I don't want to die. I want to live a full life. I want to live a life of adventure, a life of peace, a life of danger, a life of romance, a life of creation. I desire to live so that I can experience all the best sensation that life can give me. In the labs where my life was endangered, I wanted to live to see what happens after the experiments. When I was killed by the light hero, I wanted to see the life where I got my revenge. When Ian called me mom, I wanted to see the life where I become a mother. And so, right now, after seeing this void and seeing you, I want to see one more life. Shiro smiled and stepped back. I want to see a life where I transcend this system. Kuromi smiled. Then I hope you don't return to this place anytime soon. The new age is arriving, and should you experience death, I doubt your phoenix bloodline can save you. In the 20 to 50 years it'll take for you to revive, the world may be gone. Kuromi said as she aimed her hand towards Shiro. So, try not to die, okay? She chuckled. Of course. Though who knows, I might see you soon. Shiro grinned as her body disappeared. Watching her body flicker away, Kuromi glanced behind her and smiled. You sure you don't want to talk to her? No, it's fine. We'll get a chance to talk later depending on what she does. An identical voice replied with a small chuckle. Shrugging her shoulders, Kuromi started to fade away as the void was now empty once more. ####. URG. Groaning softly, Shiro felt pain rush through her body as she flinched ever so slightly. You're awake. Nantian looked down in surprise. MNWHEL. Before she could even say a single sentence, the pain caused her to stop midway. I don't talk. I'm bringing you to some medics now. Nantian smiled. Currently, they were on their way to the main headquarters of the sect since the best healers were here. I guess he succeeded in making a tier 6 magic spell. Shiro thought with a smile. Glancing into her mana realm, she could see Nimue resting in the water as her body was quite faint. Just seeing her expression told Shiro that she had been trying her hardest to keep her body working. Deciding to not disturb Nimue, Shiro glanced around her. Unfortunately, she was not able to turn her head since even the faintest movement would cause her to flinch. She could see that Nantian was holding her in a princess carry while Azul had Een on her back. Where's Estrella and Addie? She asked curiously since she couldn't see them. They're just behind me right now. Nantian smiled and turned around, allowing Shiro to see Estrella, who carried Addie in her arms. Sorry to worry you. Shiro tried her best to smile, but it seemed rather forced due to the pain. Furrowing his brows, Addie wanted to reach out and hug her, but he knew that she wasn't feeling well, so decided against it. Smiling at her, Addie then frowned at Nantian before pointing his hands towards the large collection of buildings in the distance. Right. I'll get your mother to the medics now. Nantian rolled his eyes. Haha, Addie's got a leash on you, huh? Shiro chuckled while glancing up at Nantian. Well, our interests line up, so it doesn't hurt. Plus, he was the one who helped me find the last missing piece of the puzzle for me to upgrade my magic to tier 6. Nantian replied, while making sure that Shiro was as comfortable as possible. Is that so? Good job, Addie. Shiro smiled and tried to give Addie a thumbs up. Despite her poor attempt, Addie's eyes seemed to shine with joy as she rested her head against Nantian's head since she was tired. Honestly, I expected myself to wake up in a room or some sort while being surrounded by medics. I don't remember quite clearly, but I do know that I started to funnel the mana from the ground around me to fuel the prison. I'm surprised that I woke up this early. Shiro closed her eyes. Indeed. You turned a rather large portion of the forest into the desert with your trick, you know? They're going to have to update the world map again. Nantian laughed. Speaking of which, I met a rather interesting person while I was unconscious. I'm not too sure of their identity, but I do know that they had a close link with the system. Oh, anything new that you've discovered about the system? Nantian asked curiously. Not really. I just had a small chat with her. It was rather enlightening, I suppose. Shiro shook her head. Well, that's fine too. As long as you're not being taken away by the system, I'll be happy. Funnily enough, the place where I talked to her is actually where people die. She described me as tenacious, always pulling myself out of death's grasp despite it being so close to me. Shiro smiled. To be honest, I'm not even surprised. With how close you are to death, you might as well be the Grim Reaper's best friend. Nantian chuckled. I don't tempt me. With how things are, I won't be surprised if there is a grim Reaper boss out there. Shiro grinned. Indeed. Just rest up for now. We'll reach the medic base soon enough. Nantian smiled as Shiro nodded. Glancing towards her system, she wanted to check for any updates before resting. Unfortunately, she didn't get anything out of the fight except for stacks upon stacks of negative debuffs. Sounds about right. We didn't kill the Guardian after all. Hell, we're lucky to even have our lives right now. Shiro thought to herself. However, before she looked away, she noticed a small change on her class up requirements. On top of the current requirements, there was now an additional line under the list. Tier 6 achievements, 1. So, surviving against the Guardian is a Tier 6 achievement, huh? I suppose that's only natural since the chasm between the two tiers aren't something that can be easily breached. The fact that we survive is a miracle. Shiro thought to herself. Thinking about miracles, she couldn't help but wonder about Nan Tian's Tier 6 attunement. Say, Lil Tian. Emin, what is it? I'll be honest with you. I'm still surprised that you have achieved Tier 6 magic. It's not that I didn't believe that you couldn't achieve it, but rather, it was a gamble on my side and you just won it. While I was indeed Tier 6 before, there are still parts that I don't understand, so the fact that you've transcended your tier is something amazing. Shiro admitted. If it weren't for the information that you provided along with Addie's help, I would have never achieved this. However, after achieving Tier 6 in light magic, I've seemed to have weakened my proficiency with the other elements that I control. Their effects are now weaker. Nantian replied as Shiro nodded her head. She understood what he meant since when she was a Tier 6 legend, she could only use her nanobots, but if she tried to use the individual element associated with her class, metal and lighting, the effectiveness would drop. While you are focusing your path down a specific lane, I'm guessing that this is also how you become a god of that subject, so perhaps after we kill Ikari for good, you can claim his title. Shiro suggested with a soft chuckle. I'll be fine without his title. I'll be honest with you, being associated with an asshole that killed you, twice no less, leaves quite a bad taste in the mouth. Don't worry about it. Just think of it as taking everything from him like what he did with me. Plus, just because your element is associated with the asshole, it doesn't mean that I will immediately hate your presence. Shiro chuckled. Oh, does that mean you enjoy being with me? Nantian smiled. Don't get too ahead of yourself now, young man. I believe my quote was, it doesn't mean that I will immediately hate your presence. Shiro laughed. Well, I have to make sure that it never reaches that point then. Nantian shrugged as they reached the main entrance of the sect's headquarters. Donning his mask and pulling out his proof of identity, he showed it to the guards. Welcome back, Branch Master. They bowed with a smile before glancing towards Shiro, who was in his arms. Send out a notice for the best healers to come to Medic Bay Room 1. I'll need them to help me heal the woman in my arms. Nantian ordered as they nodded their heads. Since he understood the rules of the sect, he also understood the consequences of bringing someone dangerous to the main headquarters. Understood. Oh right, is the sect master around? I haven't seen him in a while. Nantian asked. In, the sect master is by the sparring grounds as usual. There's been a few new additions that are rather well trained, and he's been excited about their growth. The guard nodded as Nantian's interests were piqued. However, Shiro was more important, so he set it aside for now. Arriving at the medic bay, he set her down on one of the beds before having the healers do a checkup on her. Seeing her damaged status, the healers couldn't help but widen their eyes at the ridiculous fact that she was still alive. However, since she was alive, they were obligated to save her. As the Tier 5 healing spells surrounded her, Shiro couldn't help but glance out the window. Right now, they were in the middle of a mountain range where there were large buildings built into the mountain itself. Much like the Shaolin Temple, there were large training grounds where Shiro could see members of the sect being trained by masters of martial arts. Just as she was about to keep on viewing the scenery, she watched as a head popped up from the bottom of the window. Making eye contact, the two of them stared at each other as Shiro had a neutral expression since she didn't know how she should react. The head belonged to a man that looked to be in his late 30s. His hair was short and was colored black, while his eyes were filled with amused and ardent. The others in the room seemed to not recognize his presence as they continued to heal her. Taking a moment to organize her thoughts, she turned to Nantian, who was beside her. Lil Tian, Emin, what is it? Look at the window and tell me what you see. Shiro said while turning back to the man. Ju. When did you get here, sect leader? Nantion widened his eyes as he didn't sense him at all. Quickly walking over to the window, he opened it and let him in. Well, when I heard that my boy has brought back a girl, I had to come look with my eyes. So care to introduce me? Also, stop being so formal already. The sect leader grinned while patting Nantion on the shoulder. Sighing softly, Nantion turned to Shiro. He is the one who saved me from Black Monarchy and is the leader of this sect. TCH, what kind of half-assed introduction is that? The sect leader clicked his tongue before looking at Shiro. My name's Li Jian. I'm basically this brat's stepfather since I raised him from young. I hope he hasn't said anything bad about me. Li Jian laughed as Nantion sighed. So this is the reserved sect master, huh? One that would spend most of his time checking on how you lot were doing in your training along with giving you some tips, huh? Where he would normally just sit by and drink some tea while watching you train, and his hobby is watching you lot cultivate your strength. Shiro raised her eyebrow at Nantion before looking back at Li Jiangua. Just looking at his aura, she could tell that he was not reserved in the slightest. Is that how the brat described me? Haha. Well, he ain't exactly wrong. I'm just curious about the girl that he had brought back home after so long. So what's your name? Li Jian asked with a chuckle. Shiro. Rather simple name. Any surname? Li Jian asked curiously. MN Asakura. Shiro replied with a smile. Shiro Asakura, huh? Doesn't ring any bells. Are you part of their lesser-known branch? Li Jian tilted his head since he kept tabs on most of the powerful families in the world, and there wasn't any Shiro Asakura in their family list. Well, my name was changed, but I was known by Kuromi before. Just as Shiro said this, Li Jian's smile faded as he grabbed Nantion. Your tastes are pretty King strong boy. Do you not want descendants? Because even if you don't, I want to see a grandkid, okay? Li Jian asked seriously while looking at Nantion like he was crazy. Seeing the sect master's seriousness, Nantion's smile twitched. Why is it that you become like this the moment I bring Shiro here? Go drink your tea or something, old man. Weren't there a few new trainees that you got your eye on? Nantion urged as Li Jian was embarrassing him. There were still healers in the room, and the female ones were blushing from the conversation. PFT, what's a cup of tea and some trainees compared to my boy's future? Listen here, I don't mind who you bring back as long as it ain't one that would bust your baby maker open like a King soft drink. PFT. Suppressing a laugh, the healers tried their best to concentrate while the males gave Nantion their condolences. After all, from what they know, Shiro was akin to a Venus flytrap. Alluring but fatal. I'm still here, you know. Shiro said as she rolled her eyes. Right. So I can give you anything you want as long as you don't bust him open like a popcorn, okay? Li Jian persuaded. URG, don't worry about it. It's not like I'm going to break his balls or bust his ass anytime soon unless he pisses me off. Shiro sighed. Or ass. Li Jian furrowed his brows. Grabbing his phone, Nantion brought up the record of Shiro in New York and passed it to Li Jian. Emin, what is it? Looking at the webpage, Li Jian's expression froze up in shock. Where did I go wrong? How did you end up like this? Li Jian sighed as he looked at Nantion with pity. Oi, my mind's perfectly sane, okay? Nantion said while taking back his phone. Hell King, no it is not. No offense, young lady. Li Jian turned to Shiro. None taken. Shiro laughed since he wasn't wrong. Nantion's tastes were indeed quite strong for him to fall in love with her. Anyways, who are the others then? Li Jian asked as he glanced at the rest of the party. Namely, Een, Addie, Estrella, and Azul. This one is Azul, she's Shiro's friend. This one is Estrella, Shiro's guard, and these two are her children. Nantion introduced while sitting down on a chair. Wait, she's already got children? One is a phoenix, the other is a spirit. Een, the girl on the left, was hatched from an egg with Shiro's blood, while Atesh, or rather, Addie, is a fusion fire elements that she had obtained. He was born thanks to her skill set, I suppose. Nantion explained. Is that so? Well, that's fine too. Anyways, I shouldn't disturb you any longer. We'll have a proper chat when you've recovered. Li Jian smiled before walking to the window once more. Jumping out, his figure disappeared as silence filled the room. Well, that was a rather interesting first meeting, no? Shiro chuckled. No word of this outside, okay? Nan Tian smiled as he looked at the healers. Of course, Branch Master. They nodded. A man's got to keep his dignity after all, they thought with an understanding smile. Seeing this, Nan Tian didn't know why, but he felt more annoyed. Sighing softly, he looked towards the rest of the party. I'll go get a few rooms for you lot, so that you can rest in the time that Shiro takes to heal. Nan Tian said before turning back to Shiro. Is there anything you want me to do while you recover? He asked. Not much to be honest. Just take this time to get used to your newfound power. Shiro smiled as Nan Tian nodded his head. After all, he was just scratching the surface of Tier 6, and he needed more time. Plus, he also needed to level up again so that he could attempt to reach Tier 6 legend like what Shiro had achieved in her previous lifetime. ####. Spending a week in the headquarters to heal herself, Shiro recovered enough to actually walk around, but her body was still weak. If she had to describe her current power, it would be equal to the average power demonstrated by level 100s, which is a far cry from her current peak. During this time, the sect master offered to help Een grow stronger since they were going to be here for a while. Naturally, Shiro's didn't reject the offer since strength was their priority right now. Adi had spent this week keeping Shiro company while Nimue was still recovering in the mana realm. Shiro guessed that it may take a while for Nimue to regain consciousness since the damage they took during the last fight was quite high. As for Azul, she just spent the time exploring around the sect for her own amuse and &. Stretching her body, Shiro did a self-scan to see if there were still any hidden injuries, but most of them needed time to recover due to the nature of the backlashes that she had stacked onto her body. I think I'll stay here for a little longer. Who knows, I might find something useful. Shiro thought with a smile before picking Adi up. Her first destination in the sect was probably the library so that she could get some information on class UPS. Walking through the sect with Adi in her arms, her appearance caused a small commotion since they knew that Nan Tian was the one who brought her back to the sect. Making her way past the training grounds, she could see Li Jian sitting on a mat with his legs crossed. He was currently wearing some baggy clothing that didn't give him the air that most would associate with sect masters. Yo, young miss. Seems like you've recovered enough to walk around now, huh? Li Jian waved towards her with a smile. MN, thank you for your help. Honestly, if not for Nan Tian calling healers for me a few times, I would be dead for good. Shiro smiled as she walked towards him. Ho, no wonder I saw him call out our healers before. I will have to say, though, there is only so much healing can do for you. If you exhaust your life energy, then not even the best healer can save you. Li Jian chuckled before raising a cup of tea to his lips. I understand. They were just unfortunate situations that I found myself in. The logical ending should be my cold dead corpse, but here we are. Shiro replied. Indeed. It just means that your fate does not end there. Care to join me in spectating their training? If you're not too hurried for time, of course. I can't just ask you to accompany this old man to watch people train. Li Jian laughed. I don't mind. Plus, it's not like my injuries will go away anytime soon. I may need to rest for another 2 weeks or so to return to my peak. Shiro shrugged before sitting next to him with Adi. So how is Nan Tian doing? I know that he's gone to further his understanding of his newly upgraded element. She asked. He's still in seclusion, but I'll be honest with you. The aura I can feel in his room is reaching impressive levels. If he increases his levels, he'll surpass me easily. Li Jian smiled and looked down at his cup of tea. You seem a bit sad. Shiro raised her eyebrow. Well, you can think of it as a parent's concern. I've looked after him since he was a kid, and I see him as my own son. With him surpassing me in strength, it means that I can no longer watch over him and protect him should the need arise. A bird has to leave his nest someday, I suppose. Li Jian chuckled softly before taking another sip. So how should I address you? I know your identity as Kuromi Asakura, but you now go by the name of Shiro. He asked while glancing towards her. Just call me Shiro. There was a bit of time where I lost my memories, so I've gotten used to being called this new name. Shiro smiled as Li Jian nodded his head. If you don't mind me asking, what do you think of the youths we have here right now? What do you think about their potential from their current performance? Li Jian asked. Don't worry about being harsh. Sometimes you need to be harsh to receive proper feedback. He reassured as Shiro nodded. So which one do you want me to feedback first them? Shiro asked, gesturing to the 10 youths that were training in the sparring grounds. Anyone you want. MN. In that case, then I'll go from left to right. The first person is Ernest. You can see from his aura and concentration in his eyes that training is a top priority for him. He takes his time to study the moves meticulously and tries his best to read his opponent's moves. However, he is a bit too analytical, which isn't a bad thing, but in a high-tension situation during a fight, it may be harder to try to read your opponents. Sometimes you need to entrust your body to instincts as well. Otherwise, he is indeed quite promising in terms of potential, Shiro said as she pointed towards the first youth. Hearing her response, Li Jian nodded his head with a small smile. As Shiro continued to give him her feedback on each of the youths, their good points and bad points in her eyes, Li Jian's smile grew wider. Seems like you're quite experienced with combat to be able to pick up all of this, Li Jian said while placing his cup down. Well, after fighting high-level opponents and almost dying quite a few times, you would pick up a thing or two. Shiro chuckled. Indeed. Honestly, I'm surprised by your analysis of these youngsters since you have a more magical background. You were the one who taught my boy how to use magic first after all. You know? Shiro raised her eyebrow in surprise. Of course I do. He told me about how you saved his life. When I first rescued him from the Black Monarchy, he didn't have much that he treasured. However, there was one thing that he refused to hand over to anyone. His coat that you gave him during winter, Li Jian said while placing his cup down. Anyways, I think your parents would be quite happy to know that you have lots of insight on physical combat, as much as you do magical. In the meantime, care to go for a light spar with one of the younger youths? Li Jian offered as Shiro's smile twitched. I am still injured, you know. Yes, I'm not telling you to fight anyone to the death, but rather just a quick exchange of moves. Li Jian nodded. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro nodded her head. Sure, I suppose. I need some exercise after being stuck in that room for a good week or so, she said while standing up. Is there anywhere I can put my son down so that he can watch? Oh, I can look after him for you while you fight. Li Jian smiled. Are you sure? Shiro asked as she didn't want to trouble Li Jian too much. Yes, don't worry about it. It's not like he would bite now, would he? Li Jian laughed. Nodding her head, Shiro passed Addy over to him before stepping down towards the sparring grounds. Ingyu, Li Jian called out. Turning her head towards the sect master, the young girl bowed. Would you mind having a simple spar with Miss Shiro over here? Nothing too serious as her body is still injured. Of course, sect master. Ingyu nodded her head as people cleared the stage a little before presenting both of them with wooden weapons. Looking at them, she eventually decided to go with a wooden long sword while Ingyu picked 2 wooden daggers. Rules are simple, no magic, no skills, martial arts only. When conditions are first contact scores a point, and whoever gets 10 points wins. Li Jian shouted out as both participants readied their weapons. Adjusting her grip on the wooden sword, Shiro moved her arm a few times to find the most optimal position. After all, her power was restricted right now due to her injuries, so she couldn't move as aggressively as she did before. However, even with this problem, her overall physical strength was still equal to an average level 100s. Taking a deep breath, she looked at her opponent with serious eyes. Begin. Just as Li Jian shouted out begin, Shiro's body dashed forward in an instant. Pivoting on her foot, she slashed her wooden sword towards Ingyu. Raising her hand, Ingyu was about to block the blade when she felt a chill down her spine. Raising her spare dagger behind her, she barely managed to block Shiro's attack as her initial figure was gone. Nice instincts, Shiro praised as she was using a slightly watered-down version of her phantom path in order to compensate for her current physical condition. Pushing her arm up, she forced Ingyu's arm into an uncomfortable position before poking her back with the wooden sword. First point, Shiro. Thank you for your praise. Ingyu smiled as she readied herself once more. Raising her eyebrow, Shiro was surprised at how well she took her loss. Nice girl, she thought to herself before making some distance between them once more. While Shiro was sparring against Ingyu, Li Jian slowly inched himself closer to Addy. Your name is Addy, huh? Are you able to speak? He asked as Addy shook his head. Ah, is that so? A shame then. Do you want to sit on Grandpa's lap and watch the fight? Li Jian asked again as Addy furrowed his brows. How about I carry you on my shoulders then? Grandpa has a large body frame, so you can watch your mum better from this height. He tried to persuade as Addie eventually nodded since it was to see his mum better. Climbing on Li Jian's body without his help, Addie made his way up to the shoulder as if climbing a mountain. Plopping himself down in a comfortable position, the two watched the fight. Surprised at how fast it was going, Li Jian couldn't help but frown slightly. I should have set the maximum points to be 20. He thought to himself since he wanted to spend time with his would-be grandchild. After all, he had always wanted to experience the feeling of being a grandpa. Winning the 10-point match was a little difficult since Ingyu was prepared for her sudden bursts of speed. However, with Shiro's vast combat experience and understanding of her body, she was able to narrowly dodge Ingyu's strikes just in time to counter with her own. The final score, 10-0. Thank you very much for your tutelage. I've learned a lot in today's spar. If you don't mind, can we do this more often? Ingyu asked with a happy smile. We'll see. I may be here for a while, so if we get the chance, then sure. Shiro smiled before making her way back to the sect master. Looking at Addie, who was sitting on Li Jian's shoulder while he was contemplating about something, brought quite a weird feeling to Shiro's heart, but she ignored it for now and reached out for Addie. Oh, not yet. Do you not want to fight against anyone else? Get some exercise. Li Jian asked with a forced smile. Furrowing her brows in suspicion, Shiro shook her head. It's okay. I'll take my son and be on my way now, she said slowly as she reached for Addie. Okay, listen, can Addie become my grandchild? Li Jian asked seriously as Shiro's smile twitched. He didn't want to beat around the bush and make excuses, so he decided to come out with his thoughts. He's my son, not flesh and blood. Like how people have stepfathers, I'll just be his step-grandpa. I don't think that's how it works. We can make it so that it works. But he has his real grandpa and grandma. My parents are still alive. What about the father's side? He has no father's side. Then I can be the grandparent on the father's side. What part of he has no father's side do you not understand? If he has none, we can just make it so that he does. How desperate are you to have a grandchild? Listen, not being able to have children does quite something on a man's psyche, okay? I want to be called grandpa by my grandkids, but it's not possible, so Addie's the next best choice. Li Jian confessed as he slammed his hand down on the ground. Widening her eyes from the sudden slam, Shiro looked at the man once more. You can't have children? No. Is it relationship problems, or? I just can't, okay. So am I Addie's grandpa now? No. Why? Because I've literally only known you for a week. Shiro stood up. A week is nothing. There used to be marriages happening when people knew each other for only 2 days. That's the past, old man. And it's something else entirely. The past is the foundation of the future. Whatever, I'm going. Shiro shook her head and wanted to leave. Who knows if this old man was about to kidnap her son when she's not looking. Glancing at Li Jian, Addie thought about it for a moment before smiling and giving him a small wave. Addie, don't wave to strange, creepy old men. He looks 30 plus, but his actual age is deceiving. Shiro lectured as Addie retracted his wave. Damn it, young lady. Just let this old man have his wish, okay? Why are you like this? Because he's my son. Why don't you just adopt one if you want a grandkid? That's not the same. Li Jian stood up. Why isn't it the same? Because my boy Nantian only has eyes for you. I've tried to match him a few times already, but he rejected them. I thought it was a romance thing, so I had my elders read some tips and books online to see how they would woo the opposite SCX and help him, but it didn't work. Even after all the elders tried to teach him, he still hasn't wooed anyone. Wait, you're the cause of his initial approach? Shiro glared at the old man in annoyance, since he was the catalyst that pushed little beggar on a path to become a stalker. Yes, because he never showed interest towards girls. At one point I thought he was gay, so I tried to match him with males, and he got pissed off at me. Li Jian confessed. Since he only has eyes for you, Addie is the closest thing to a proper grandkid, okay? Just let this old man have his wish. Like I said, no. Shiro huffed before leaving. If you give me food, I'll be your grandkid. And before you say anything, I'm kidding. In called out nonchalantly, as she was currently holding a roasted chicken drumstick. Earlier, she was eating in the canteen with Azul before sensing that Shiro was walking around, so she wanted to come talk to Shiro only to stumble on the two of them arguing about how he couldn't be Addie's grandpa. Ain't that cannibalism? Shiro raised her eyebrow. Looking down on the chicken drumstick, Een shrugged. This one doesn't fly, and it can't breathe fire. Not the same. Anyways, it's just a name, Mom. Isn't having more people keep Addie company good? She asked as Shiro glanced back at Li Jian, who was trying to get Addie's attention. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro agreed that it was good, but it was quite odd to have Li Jian become Addie's grandpa. After all, with how Li Jian phrased it, Nan Tian and Li Jian would essentially become Addie's father's side of the family. Quickly shaking her head of the thought, Shiro refused once more. Well, just because you can't be called Lil Bro's grandpa doesn't mean you can't treat him well. Een shrugged and took a bite of the chicken. But he won't call me grandpa then. Li Jian sighed. It's not like he can talk yet since he's young. Anyways, I'ma go back to Azul now. She's still waiting in the canteen. Een waved her hand before jumping into the shadow. Did you come here to make trouble for me? Shiro's smile twitched before turning back to Li Jian. You can stay with Addie, but just so that we're clear, you're not his grandpa, okay? Why are you so against it? Like your daughter said, it's just a name. Li Jian pouted slightly as Shiro felt a shiver down her spine. The sight of a middle-aged man like Li Jian pouted gave her quite the shock. Well, it's because Lil Tian will be akin to Addie's dad if that's the case, Shiro said while glancing away. Tilting his head for a moment, Li Jian's lips curved into a **T-eating grin. So that's the case. Ha ha ha. Young lady, your thought process is quite cute. Ha ha ha. You're one of those tsundere things, aren't you? Okay, I got it. I won't be Addie's grandpa. Li Jian laughed as he gave her a knowing wink. Since she's one of those tsundere people, Li Jian understood that he essentially needed to reverse her sentences. You can't be Addie's grandpa you can be his grandpa, but not yet. Eat **T and die, old man. What do you mean I'm one of those tsundere things? Shiro gritted her teeth since she felt like she was about to bust a vein talking to this old man. The worst part of it was that she couldn't harm him either since she owed him a debt of gratitude. Not only did he save Nantian, he had also saved her a few times with the healers. On top of that, he even provided some manpower during the fight against Ikari. Ha ha ha, it's okay, I understand. Li Jian smiled. If you want to visit Lil Tian, his room is on the 3rd floor of the main building. It shouldn't be too hard to find. He chuckled. I'm not looking for him. Shiro huffed before storming off. The longer she talked with him, the more she felt she was about to lose her mind. Seeing Shiro walk away, Li Jian gave Addie a wave before pouring himself another cup of tea. Nantian, you found quite an interesting person. He thought with a smile. ####. Asking around for where the library is, Shiro realized something. She hadn't asked permission to use it yet. **CK. She muttered since it meant that she needed to go back to the old man after literally just telling him to eat **T and die. Seeing Shiro frown slightly, Addie tilted his head before reaching out to Shiro and pushed the side of her lips up into a smile. *bottom. Oh, why are you so cute? Shiro smiled and hugged Addie. Mommy's just thinking about how I should talk to that old man again. Don't worry. Hearing this, Addie puffed out his chest and patted it, as if telling Shiro to leave it to him. It's fine, Addie. You don't have to worry. Shiro smiled before turning around. Taking a deep breath, she mentally prepared herself to talk to Li Jian again.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.